Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the opportunity. Thank you, Christine, Tristan, Philippe, for this opportunity to put ideas together. As we saw yesterday at the macro vision of the platformization of economy, there was kind of a trend of analysis that was in the sense of a uniform or hegemonic force. And even at that level, we can already see that there are different trends also. Very slowly, there is a trend of balkanization of the web, of a territorialization of the internet, in the sense of nation laws that very progressively get how to say, platforms in their control, very progressively, but mainly in terms of available services, in terms of catalog available in each country. There are variations that are important to take into account. And now we are going to see much important variations when we focus on the micro level, which I'm going to do. So when we see those that we now call the content providers, I'm talking about specific actors that are the artists, and the self-produced artist is kind of emblematic of the internet era. I mean, in the sense of the DIY, do-it-yourself, but it's also very complex to apprehend because they articulate symbolic and economic valuations. And I think it's an interesting moment to look at these, because the COVID and the degrees of confinement, according to every country, showed an acceleration of the telework for musicians with the no choice, home production, live streaming, online promotion, etc. But in fact, when we start looking, not every artist producer played this game. And we have seen very differentiated dispositions for that. In my title, I put access, but it's not in the sense of a digital divide, but a question of social conditions for professional activity as a musical artist and content producer. So it's in the sense of entrance fees in a career, entrance fees in the savage translation of droit d'entrée, for in the sense of Gérard Mauger, for example, worked on this theme a few times ago. I'm trying to see how I can switch. Okay, perfect. So initially, my aim was to systematize comparison between different production configurations in Brazil and Central Africa. In fact, it's several fields I've been working on these last years. And they are very different art worlds and professional ideals and styles with already a long tradition and a good state of art, not in concern of the relation to platforms, but in terms of sociology of this art world. And I wanted to make it not just an international comparison, but also a comparison between poles of production. I mean, on the traditional pole, what I call traditional with the quotes, it's we have traditional Brazil-rooted instrumental music we've been working on with, for example, with Gabriel Prota. And on the urban side, which is more mainstream, we have the rap or carioca funk. And on the Gabon and Cameroon pole, I'm trying to study. We have the Bikuti on the traditional side and the Gabonese rap on the other. It's also an indicator of different popularities. So these are different strategies for the producers, because on the one side we have kind of an elite production with a restrictive public. It's more traditional in the sense of noble, and some of them have international audience. And in the mainstream, the urban is more mainstream and sometimes actually making mainstream and sometimes more commercial. So this was to be a collective research with partners such as Gabriel Improda or Daniela Vieira from Brazil. And this is why this research wasn't able to go much forward on the field for the last 2 years. We had a few trips to Brazil that have been canceled. So I'll focus mainly on methodology questions for building a critical approach, and I'll detail a few elements of the careers concerning musical producers. So I'm mainly based to do things simple. I'm trying to do something around the sociology of profession. So what's today in the actual configuration, a professional artist or a producer? So we have different ways to grasp this. If we consider this as an activity we can live from, but even that has a very important variation from a country to another. I mean, it's not the same income needed if you're in the United States, in Brazil, or in Cameroon. It's very different. It's also a symbolic recognition from the internal field of musicians, and from a symbolic recognition from the public, and also a collective construction in the sense of cultural policies, in the sense of building unions. In the case of Brazil, we had a very dense collective construction that started in the 1910 with the question of professional associations. Then in the 1930s, we had a radio hospital, a radio syndicate, and more recently, we had an order for musicians, etc., etc. In the case of Cameroon and Gabon, it's more what would say informal, but that's an interesting discussion. Can we talk about informality where there is no formality? Well, that's a point. And I would like to connect also to this reflection a few references also to digital labor, because it shows pretty well how platform transform the way we work and the working relations, and in particular how it turns invisible many operations that we can consider as work, but that are never counted anywhere, and also when the users are considered workers in some kind. Well, so this is I'll try. I don't know. Yes, you see. So at the beginning, I'll try to put a few steps to building a critical approach to this scale of interpretation, and then I'll focus a little more on socialization to get to the digital trajectories of these producers, and to explain two different strategies that I have studied, more concentrated on Central Africa. So the first critical disposition needed to grasp this question is that we have to take distance from the tech imaginary, and we have to take a not enchanted point of view on artistic autonomy. Okay, there is a long tradition in a musical industry of thinking autonomy, dependency, etc. And this has been mobilized very strongly by internet revolution with, well, when you see YouTube, broadcast yourself, you know, but even on other sides, the Creative Commons, they also mobilized the imaginary of disintermediation, which we're going to see is not the case at all. The second aspect, which I'm very based on that, is to take in consideration historical genesis and long-term reconfigurations of musical sector, in the sense not only to understand what's happening, because there are some social inerties in the configurations, okay, so on the long term, but also because at the level of the careers of the artist producers or any artist, I mean, a career can last 40, 50, 60 years. And well, every artist goes through different reconfigurations. And I've been very attentive to this moment where when configuration stabilize, and then when we pass to another, and this transforms deeply the activity of the producers. And as you can see here, for example, these are the revenues from radio, when radio in Brazil was a musical producer, okay? It was all live and direct. And for these producers, well, you see that in 40s, 60s, from the 30s, 40s, they live exclusively from this activity. And then when the advertisement resources go to the TV, well, the revenue fall down, and you see in their activity that they start working on festivals, on long play, coordination, production arrangement, etc. So at the level of more recent transformations, we have a succession of material support that are very accelerated, and one and the other, they come. It's not just a substitution. So we have to take this into account to understand better what's happening to us today, and not to focalize on the novelty of what's happening to us. Well, I'll go very fast from that because we have a real problem in objectivating what's happening in terms of statistics. And so I made this reference to Dave Harker, The Wonderful World of EFPI, in their latest release of 2017, I think. It was, I lost in my notes. We had 13 main recorded music markets, countries that represent 85% of the global revenue for recorded music. So here, when we focalize on Brazil, sure, we have a main player of this market. But when we focus here, where is music activity is very intense, and we have no data. At the era of data, it's kind of strange. It would be, there are certainly very good data, but they are not public. Well, now let's slow down a little bit and consider. So you understood my scale is observing the careers, or the entire careers of artists. And in this, at this level, well, we see that a very important aspect is the socialization. In the paper of Gabriel Improta in 2008 that we published with Christine ITHURBIDE in Cahiers d'Outre-mer last year, but it was 2018. No, it was 2 years ago. Time goes so fast. That was before. Okay, so he identified very cleverly the generational effects on the relation of platforms. It was very important to see that producers that were socialized in the 1980s, 1990s, they were considering what's happening to us today with platform economy as an end of the world. Okay, they play the game, but it's very an amertume. I don't know how to say that, but they go backwards. And when we see younger instrumental producers, well, they see this is the normal struggle for survival, and they disconsider the fact that there was, for example, now today, every single intervention in studio is negotiated from $0 to $2,000. And at the ones that were socialized in the 1980s, 1990s, they knew before they get into the studio how much they would get at the minimum. So these are the kind of conditions that have strongly evaluated. In other papers of the same release, I showed that this socialization and the generational effects has also implications in terms of value and know-how transmissions, intergenerational transmissions, also in terms of technical skills and dispositions. Now, an important kind of variations that we also identified is the position towards entrepreneurial ethos and vision. So we see several artist producers as they are mainly working on an artwork project, while others are really running a business. Okay, this is a different level. We have in this self-produced artists, several are working on companies properly. They're working on individual entrepreneurship or on associations. Okay. This would probably change if I could have deepened the work on rap and funk in Brazil. Okay, this is another aspect I wanted to say, because what we want to show mainly, this is the main lack of this study, is that we have also categories of artists that deeply integrated in that system, and that works for them. It's not only a pessimistic point of view that we can take. A main factor to understand the diversity of positions towards a platform is the existence or not of an artistic intermediation environment. I mean, management, editors, tour managers, labels. That makes the very important. So we don't have just artists posting content on platforms. We have persons that are working on a career and with deep interdependencies. And well, the institutional environment is very important. I also already talked a little bit about that. So now we can get into the specific trajectories that are digital trajectories. For those who were socialized in the 1980s, 1990s, the first digital trajectory is to get equipment. And that's a main difference when equipment became less expensive, and mainly for the case I've been working with in terms of mobility and interoperability. So you can have very small devices that work even on battery. And you can, here, you can see, well, you go deep in the forest, you get some material there, and then you come back to your home studio, and then you go mix in a professional studio, and then you master in another. These are all fully integrated, which wasn't so easily the case before, without quality loss. The second aspect of digital trajectories begins more in the 2000s and gets an acceleration by the 2010s. The first step was to build official websites for artists, per artist. And at that time, it could be thought that we could skip the intermediaries in that sense. So here in the little graph I show you, you have the traditional physical CD chain of distribution. And here you could think by downloading. It was the time we thought about downloading MP3. So through the personal website to distribute directly, which was kind of an illusion. And then began the very strong intermediation through the first platforms. And then the complexification and the number of platforms that are disponible made it necessary to have another intermediate, which are aggregators that to which you post the contents there, and then they spread it to all the platforms, and they get the revenue in one place. We can talk about this later. So now the official site and the social networks, well, they serve as a way of distribution of these contents. So you use the interfaces. You have no need to have a strong storage or a strong bandwidth, or etc. You intermediate these aspects. And so this may look simple, but you already have a diversification of the channels to diffuse or distribute. And then you have to think that the access to aggregator is mainly paid. So you have to calculate if you can get through streaming, if you can pay the $50 for each track, and you have to work a lot to get these $50. Some aggregators are even accessible through gatekeeping, so you have to have a label to get in. After that, you have to add that there are professional platforms too, kind of social networks like Reorganization, Bandcamp. These are open platforms where you build a reputation between professionals, and you can get some gigs, and sometimes distribute a few products. And then the next level is the access to new kind of professionals. So you have new kind of intermediaries that can manage your optimization of visibility, they can manage your ad campaigns, buy clicks, post boosting, tracklist integration, etc. All of these, so you have now specialists that struggle for SEO, your referencement. So there is a new task division for visibility. Well, when we talk about African countries, you have to say that before all that, you need a fundamental platform, is a bank account, and that's not so easy. We can talk a little bit about that. So that's just an old snapshot of how in the beginning of the 2000s, there were already a lot of platforms, and this is still continuing. So you have to get into this kind of reflections. Well, I don't have the time to detail this, so we can come back after that. But this is the variations of profitability according to the channels of distribution. Okay, so if you're pressing a CD at home, if you're printing 2,000 CDs, or if you are in a streaming or downloading, so the circle here is the number of unities of consumption needed to get the $1,150 for a minimum survival. Well, this is not up to date, but it's an indication that the kind of choices you have to do to put your effort in looking for rentability. In these trajectories, well, we found that the space, the cultural space is also changing. And I'm connecting another work I've been working on is the reconfiguration of ethnicity in Central Africa with the Facebook in particular, where there was a reinvention of a category, Ekan. Okay, this ethnic category was not in use. And this is a kind of a confederation of ethnicity, of ethnic cross-border. So you have 5 countries, and 5 countries with very different colonial processes and state-building processes and musical traditions, and they have connected through Facebook. And now you have huge communities in which you have cultural entrepreneurs that have emerged first on editorial with these comics here, and then you had magazines, and then you have festival, okay, the cross-boundary festival, and then you see that different artists have invested this segment. And it's very interesting because when you see, even the rappers have been into this one when they have a connection to local languages, and it's the ability to identify markets and styles. An ability to produce attention and interaction in every specific way of sociability. So in this Facebook, this rapper I've been working on, he's very smart, and he tells that to this kind of community, he takes the model of the gospel community. So gospel communities are they say a lot, but they never have a media. Okay, you never have a TV or a radio unless their own radio. And he says, in this community, you have to say, just like in the gospel, you say, in the name of Jesus, and everybody says amen. So he works that way with this kind of communities, excuse me, and also with his rap and hip hop communities. He uses very different kind of languages and strategies of exposure. And he's in Gabon, kind of an entrepreneur, even if it's not a big company, and he takes opportunities from the informal situation in which you can through personal relations and have a direct access to business opportunities. And his case is very interesting because very early he used, like, these are SIM cards that he used as promotional. So when you have the Indian operator getting into West and Central Africa, he goes directly to them and asks for making operations. This is one first modality. Recently, during the COVID, well, he already has been invested in kind of live streaming. And now he found a way to sponsor this live streaming with Airtel. So he's synchronizing with the experiments of these companies that are trying to get into the market and get a cool vision of the services. On the other side, the COVID crisis is not invested by everyone. And I saw other artists that during the COVID, instead of exposing themselves more on social networks, they have retracted because they don't have their activity and they use social networks as a promotion for other activities. So they disappeared from social networks, but have been worked on political relationship in Cameroon, and it has finally become a way to place musical contents in distance education. And we can talk a little bit about distance education market, if you wish to, because it's kind of spectacular. Well, very, very quickly, I get to my conclusion. So the problem in all this is that we have not a disintermediation at all, but multiple intermediation system. When they'll sell you, it's easy, just one click, it's millions of clicks, literally, that you have to do a commandant. He told me that he works minimum 2 hours per day on social networks, just for social network. Then he goes to his production, then he goes to his live streaming, so you're working for platforms, right? Not for yourself in this logic. But I want to say that what's interesting, Gabriel Improta formalized the idea that there was a logic of the de-specialization, the end of specialization in musical activities. Well, that's not a novelty, so we have to take care about that. But there is partially in some careers a moment where you quit a specific activity and you have to diversify. Just what I wanted to say, that the meaning and strategies of producing and posting content can be very diverse. A YouTube video or Facebook post can be aiming revenue for stream and download. It can be promotion for other products like live shows, CDs, merchandising. It can be, and it's mostly producing indicators of popularity in order to gain the possibility to convince partners or professional intermediaries, and in the worst case, just a psychological or symbolic satisfaction of being public existent. Well, just as a concluding word, I would say that polyactivity is maybe an indicator of position in the musical field, and that's the perspective of this work is to systematize and multiply the studies, the case studies on these 4 poles, to understand if they are global characteristics that we can identify. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vassili. It was very, very interesting. So we follow you totally when you say that, well, you have to struggle against the discourses on disintermediation, and we follow you totally when you state that there are, on the contrary, a multitude of new intermediaries that have to be taken into account by these content creators. And the other very important point you make is that you show that these content creators are not just abstract entities. They are made of flesh and blood, and you have to take into consideration the huge variety in one country and between countries. And that's very interesting.